On a starlit balcony, Vivian stood alone when she suddenly sensed someone approaching from behind. Startled, she froze for a moment before turning around with a bright smile, warmly greeting the man as Sir Rahitas. Rahitas looked slightly flustered by her beauty under the night sky and placed a hand on his forehead, questioning why she was out so late. Standing before the massive clock on the balcony, Vivian asked if he had heard the news from the Imperial banquet. Rahitas confirmed that he knew the crown prince had proposed to her. Vivian nodded and said that was exactly what she wanted to discuss. Then, in a serious tone, she asked him to find her one trustworthy man. Rahitas was stunned. Vivian clarified that she preferred the man to be the son of a foreign noble family. She explained that she had to either marry or at least announce an engagement immediately. Otherwise, she would inevitably have to marry the crown prince. She said she only needed someone willing to enter a contract marriage for 1 year. Rahitas was shocked and clearly displeased. With a cynical tone, he asked if she was truly planning to go through with such nonsense, marrying another scoundrel for convenience. Vivian was confused by his sudden harshness and asked why he was acting that way. In a voice filled with pain, Rahitas reminded her of a promise she once made, that she would live with him forever. Vivian was stunned. Before she could react, Rahitas suddenly grabbed her firmly, frightening her. He cornered her and asserted that she had once said she wanted to marry him. Vivian panicked internally, desperately trying to remember when she could have said such a thing. Seeing the pain in his eyes made her feel guilty. She pleaded with him not to look at her that way, and firmly denied ever saying it. However, she was deeply confused about his strange behavior. At that moment, Rahita's image overlapped with the memory of a young girl from her childhood, the only person she had ever promised her life to. She remembered promising to return one day, to her precious friend. A shocking thought crossed her mind. Could Sir Rahitas actually be her childhood friend, Rael? She immediately dismissed the idea as impossible. Rahitas demanded a clear answer and pressed her hand against the wall, reminding her that marriage required physical closeness. He leaned in as if about to kiss her, adding that marriage also involved kisses. Then Vivian remembered something shocking. The Rael she knew was a girl. In fact, Rael was the villainess of this world's story. Rahitas asked if she could truly perform such intimate acts with another man. Vivian answered no, confused, realizing she couldn't even do them with him. Her life felt completely overturned. The friend she had known her whole life was actually a man. She felt deceived. The story then shifted 10 years into the past. Young Vivian lay bedridden with a severe fever. When she regained consciousness, she realized she had been reincarnated into the world of a novel she read in her previous life titled The Crown Prince Loves Birds. Terrified, she understood she had become Vivian, the original heroine of the story, and the male lead was the crown prince, Prince Aelin. At first, reincarnating into a romance novel where a commoner girl wins the crown prince's heart sounded like pure luck, but the reality was brutal. The novel ended in tragedy. The heroine died from a terminal illness, leaving Crown Prince Aelin drowning in regret. And Vivian realized she was that heroine. Sitting on the floor in shock, little Vivian understood that she was destined to suffer from mana overload syndrome, an incurable illness. The disease caused massive amounts of mana to accumulate inside the body, concentrating around the heart. Eventually, the mana would reach its limit and explode, killing the host. That was her future. However, she remembered there was one way to survive. There was only one person in the entire novel who could relieve the symptoms of mana overload. She quickly wrote the name down. Rahel. Rahel Edelin wasn't just any character. She was the primary villainess of the story. More than a love rival, she was practically the final boss, with ambitions to take the throne. Unlike Vivian, who suffered from excess mana, Rahel had the rare ability to absorb mana from her surroundings and make it her own. In the original story, Vivian had refused Rahel's treatment out of fear for Prince Alan's safety, and that decision led to her death. But this new Vivian had no intention of following the original plot. She decided that a hero who only realizes his lover's worth after her death wasn't worth her time. She crossed Prince Alan's name off her list completely and resolved not to care about his future regret. Her new survival plan was simple: stay close to Rahel and live. She even added another goal: to prevent Rahel from walking down the path of evil. Satisfied with what she believed was the perfect plan, Vivian began her mission from her family's small bakery. Filled with determination, she headed straight to Rahel's residence. Soon, she stood before the majestic villa of Duke Adelin. She knew Rahel was the only daughter of a prestigious ducal family. As a mere commoner, she couldn't meet the young duchess directly, so she needed a strategy. Her first step was to befriend the servants and gather information about Rahel and her household. If she learned enough, she might gain a chance to approach Rahel herself. Gathering her courage, Vivian stepped forward and greeted a group of servants. As expected, they looked surprised to see a small village girl approaching them so boldly. So she introduced herself with a bright smile. She said her name was Vivian, daughter of Diaz Hessen, owner of Vivi's bakery in the village. She proudly added that she was 9 years old. She told them she had heard they recently moved into the area and came to welcome them. She complimented the mansion, saying she admired it every day on her way through the village. Then she offered herself as a village guide, explaining that she had lived there for half her life, and they could ask her anything they were curious about. To win them over, she began giving useful advice. She told one maid about a lotion sold in the village shop that made skin incredibly soft. The maid immediately showed interest and asked about the price. Vivian realized her plan was working. Feeling victorious, she explained that the lotion cost 1 silver coin and was currently under a buy one, get one free promotion. Then she smoothly shifted the topic, recommending a delicious drink served by Uncle Pierre at his tavern. One of the guards suddenly interrupted her with a mocking smile, questioning how a child her age could possibly know the quality of Uncle Pierre's drink. He teasingly asked if she had tried it herself. Vivian immediately denied it. She explained that she was only repeating what an old man in the village said, a man who drank it every single day. Then, in an exaggerated childish tone, she added that the old man swore every night he would quit drinking the next morning, yet somehow always returned to the tavern at sunrise. She declared that this clearly proved how irresistible the drink must be. Her theatrical explanation made the servants burst into laughter. Even the guard admitted he might have to try it himself. Vivian smiled inwardly. She had successfully broken the tension. Soon after, another servant asked if she knew where to buy high-quality cheese. He needed to purchase some the next day. Vivian puffed out her little chest confidently and declared that she knew every corner of the neighborhood. He could rely on her completely. The servant gratefully accepted her help. After saying goodbye and promising to meet again the next day, Vivian left while the servants warmly saw her off, wishing her a safe walk home. As she walked away, she wore a sly smile. For a first step, she felt she had accomplished enough. Still, she couldn't hide a small regret. She hadn't met Rahel herself. But she reassured herself that there was still time. There would be more opportunities. Just as she was about to leave the area, she glanced up at the mansion and froze. At one of the upper windows stood a girl. Vivian's eyes widened. The girl was Rahel. Even from a distance, Rahel's beauty was breathtaking. She possessed an ethereal elegance, made even more captivating by the cold, unreadable expression on her face. She looked distant, mysterious, almost untouchable. Vivian found herself momentarily dazzled, but she quickly snapped out of it. This wasn't the time to stare. She resolved to greet her immediately, but before she could move, Rahel stepped away from the window and disappeared. Vivian felt a flicker of disappointment. Rahel had already returned inside. For a moment, she wondered anxiously if she had seemed suspicious or intrusive, but she pushed that thought aside. At the very least, she had made some kind of impression. Getting closer would come later. Satisfied with her progress, she considered her goal for the day complete. The next day, she kept her promise and accompanied one of the Duke's servants to buy cheese. However, the cheesemonger, Uncle Gerald, was stubborn and skeptical. He found it hard to believe that a noble household would want his humble cheese. Vivian immediately stepped in. With enthusiasm, she praised the quality of his cheese and criticized his lack of confidence in his own product. Using her persuasive charm, she managed to convince the old man. In the end, she secured a supply contract between him and the Duke's mansion. On the way back, the servant expressed sincere gratitude. He thanked her repeatedly, even calling her by name. He told her that thanks to her efforts, they would be able to serve cheese at the dinner table. Vivian modestly replied that it was only natural for neighbors to help each other. But internally, a sly smile formed. Now it was his turn to help her. Suddenly, she began the next phase of her plan. She clutched her stomach and pretended to feel weak, claiming she was extremely hungry after all the walking. She suggested they return quickly. The servant looked confused by her sudden change, but also embarrassed. He couldn't possibly ignore a hungry child, especially one who had just helped him so much. As Vivian began to walk away, he quickly stopped her and called her name. She smiled secretly. Her plan had worked. Feigning shyness, she hesitantly asked what he needed. The servant awkwardly invited her into the mansion for a snack as a token of gratitude. Vivian couldn't contain her joy. She jumped up and shouted, "Yes!" before immediately catching herself. She lowered her voice and shyly asked if it was really appropriate for her to enter. Vivian sat comfortably with the servants around a large table, happily eating a slice of cake and thanking them for their kindness. She enjoyed every bite. One of the maids suggested taking her on a tour of the garden later, praising its beautiful design. Vivian eagerly agreed. Looking around innocently, she commented that the mansion looked like a palace where a princess might live. A maid replied that a princess did live there, known as the Ice Princess. The title immediately caught Vivian's attention. She remembered the girl she saw at the third-floor window yesterday and wondered if that was the Duke's daughter. She grew curious about her personality, especially considering how breathtakingly beautiful she was. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted. A young girl burst into the room demanding more cake. She stopped when she noticed Vivian and asked who she was. The servant who had brought Vivian quickly explained that she was a neighborhood child who helped him, so he invited her for a snack. The maid smiled and suggested that the girl, whose name was Sally, try getting along with Vivian. Sally reacted with open contempt. She mocked the idea, asking if they seriously expected her to play with a village peasant. Vivian silently wondered who this arrogant girl was. Rahel's only known family was her grandfather, Duke Edelin. She quickly realized this must be the nanny's daughter. The maid explained that although Sally was a commoner, she behaved like a noble because her mother was treated well in the mansion. Sally exploded with anger. She shouted at the servant, accusing him of daring to bring a street beggar into the Duke's villa. She called Vivian dirty and disgusting. The maid tried to calm her, saying her words were too harsh for a child. But Sally ignored her and refused to befriend someone dirty. She ordered the servants to throw Vivian out immediately. Before anyone could act, a deep masculine voice cut through the noise, asking what was causing the commotion. Everyone turned. An imposing man stood at the entrance. The servants immediately stood and bowed respectfully, addressing him as, "Your Excellency." Vivian instantly recognized him. This was Duke Colt Edelin, Rahel's grandfather. Sally rushed to him at once, complaining that this child had entered the mansion without permission and dared to enter his residence. Vivian felt a brief moment of panic. Then she realized this was her chance. If she impressed the Duke, she might get closer to Rahel. The Duke sharply asked who had brought the child inside. The servant who accompanied Vivian hesitantly admitted it was him. He explained that she helped him secure the cheese deal, and he felt it would be wrong to send her away without a reward. He only intended to offer her a snack before escorting her out. The Duke grew curious. He questioned whether a small child had truly negotiated prices, even though she looked completely ordinary. Vivian immediately stepped forward. She bowed respectfully and introduced herself politely as Vivian, daughter of Das Hessen, and greeted the Duke properly. She then asked permission to speak, which the Duke granted. With calm confidence, she explained that James had told her His Excellency was a man of honor, who never ignored someone who offered help. She added that James believed failing to reward someone who assisted him might anger his master. Her words were deliberate. The Duke instantly understood that she was subtly protecting the servant. If he punished James and threw her out, he would appear as someone who did not value favors. After a brief pause, the Duke turned to the butler, Owen, and ordered him to reward the child properly with food and money. Sally was stunned. She angrily questioned how he could reward a beggar instead of punishing her. The Duke firmly told Sally that Vivian was right. It was dishonorable to mistreat someone who had helped the Edelin family. Then he sharply asked if she believed his decision was wrong. Sally immediately became flustered. She lowered her head and nervously replied that it was a merciful and just judgment. Vivian bowed deeply, thanking the Duke for his generosity and promising to repay the favor in any way possible. The Duke gave a faint smile. Inwardly, he noted that her promise meant she intended to visit the mansion often. He found her clever, even a bit of a swindler, but he also saw potential in her intelligence. Smart children, he thought, were easy to use. Coincidentally, he happened to need a girl around her age. Her appearance had come at the perfect time. The next day, Vivian helped her father sweep the bakery as usual. Her father, Diaz Hessen, noticed she had been waking up unusually early and affectionately asked what caused this sudden diligence. Vivian knew the real reason. She planned to visit the villa again, but she worried he might find out. He had strictly forbidden her from going near that place before, threatening to scold her severely. She still didn't understand why he had been so strict about it. To avoid suspicion, she innocently told him she simply decided to become a more diligent girl. Her father looked pleased with her answer. Suddenly, he stumbled while placing the bakery sign outside. Vivian rushed to him in concern, asking if he was all right and reminding him to be careful. She checked his face for injuries, but he reassured her he was fine. He removed his glasses to examine them. Vivian sighed in relief when she saw they weren't broken. Still, she couldn't help wondering why he insisted on wearing glasses when his eyesight was perfectly fine. They only seemed to get in his way. Privately, she admitted that her father's baking skills were terrible. She often wondered what strange ingredients he used to produce such odd colors. Despite that, customers still came. Two village ladies entered and praised Vivian for helping her father. Diaz greeted them with a bright smile. His handsome face immediately drew compliments from the women, and he responded with playful shyness. Vivian internally remarked that their loyal customers probably stayed for her father's good looks, not his baking. She even sighed, thinking sales would skyrocket if he simply stopped wearing those glasses. After the ladies left, they invited Vivian to play later. She politely said goodbye. Her father then asked if they were ready to start welcoming customers. Vivian enthusiastically replied yes. Suddenly, a luxurious carriage stopped in front of the bakery. Diaz looked puzzled, wondering why such a carriage would stop at their modest shop. Vivian's heart nearly stopped when she recognized the Edelin ducal crest engraved on the door. Her shock deepened when the butler who stood beside the Duke yesterday stepped out. The man approached them and greeted them formally. Vivian returned the greeting, flustered and confused about his sudden visit. Meanwhile, her father gave her a sharp look, silently questioning how she knew the Edelin butler. Feeling nervous under her father's gaze, Vivian quickly smiled brightly and asked the butler if he had come to buy bread. The butler calmly replied that he came for another reason. He formally introduced himself as Owen, the butler of the Edelin Duchy. Then he addressed Diaz directly, asking if he was Mr. Diaz Hessen, Vivian's father. Diaz confirmed, clearly surprised. Without delay, Owen stated the purpose of his visit. The Duke wished for Vivian to become a playmate for the young lady of the house. Both Vivian and her father were stunned. Inside, Vivian felt overwhelmed with joy. Everything was falling into place. Her plan was working perfectly. Owen explained that the Duke had been impressed by Vivian's personality and potential after meeting her the previous day. The moment her father heard that, his expression darkened instantly. His face turned terrifyingly cold as he muttered that the Duke had met Vivian yesterday. The look he gave her made her feel like she was about to be executed on the spot. Meanwhile, the butler continued calmly. He explained that Vivian would attend lessons alongside the young lady and that the Edelin family would fully support her education and needs. Hearing that, Vivian happily hugged her father. thinking the terms were perfect. But her joy didn't last. Her father politely thanked the butler for the generous offer, and then rejected it. He said his daughter still lacked much, and that there were many things he had yet to teach her. She was not qualified to be the young lady's playmate. Vivian immediately objected. She grabbed her father's sleeve and insisted they needed to talk. She pulled him inside the bakery, away from the butler. Once inside, her father sharply asked why she had gone to the Duke's villa in the first place. Vivian quickly realized that crying or acting cute wouldn't work this time. So she answered with innocent composure, claiming she was only curious about the villa and had planned to look at it from outside. She insisted meeting the Duke was purely by chance. Her father sighed deeply and said he would speak with the butler again. Then he tried to make her promise never to go to the duchy again. Vivian firmly refused. She declared she had to go there. Her father demanded to know why. She couldn't tell him the full truth about mana overload or the original novel's tragic ending, so she chose a partial truth. She told him she wanted to be cured of her illness. Her father froze. His face changed instantly. He grabbed her in alarm and asked why she was suddenly talking about illness. He demanded to know if she had been feeling unwell or hiding something from him. Vivian reassured him she was fine and told him to calm down. With tearful eyes, she explained that she simply wanted to recover quickly so she could live with him for a long time. She said she didn't want him worrying about her anymore. Then she added that the Duke likely knew skilled doctors and wizards from the capital. If they asked for help, surely he wouldn't refuse. After a long silence, her father hugged her tightly. He agreed. They would ask the Duke for help. Vivian hugged him back with overwhelming joy, thanking him repeatedly. The next day, she arrived at the Duke's mansion as planned. Butler Owen welcomed her inside a magnificent glass greenhouse. He politely informed her that he would fetch the young lady and asked her to wait. Vivian sat down, impatient and excited. This would finally be her official meeting with Rahel. She adjusted her clothes carefully, wanting to look presentable and make a good impression. Then she heard footsteps. She turned eagerly, expecting Rahel. Instead, Sally appeared. Sally looked furious, like a wild animal ready to attack. She demanded to know how Vivian dared to return. Vivian calmly smiled and told her she was there to become the young lady's playmate and looked forward to working with her. Sally's anger intensified. She mocked her and demanded to know who she thought she was. She shouted, asking who had allowed her to enter without her mother's permission. Vivian replied innocently, questioning whether the Duke needed her mother's permission too. Then, with a sly smile, she suggested Sally go inform her mother that the Duke had brought a beggar from the market to be the young lady's friend. Sally was enraged. She declared she would see what would happen to Vivian and stormed off. Vivian quietly laughed to herself, satisfied. After things settled, she realized a long time had passed. But Rahel still hadn't appeared. Anxiety crept in. Then suddenly she felt it. Vivian suddenly collapsed back into her chair, gasping for air. It felt as if her heart was about to explode from the inside. She immediately realized no one could see her like this. If they discovered she was sick, they would never allow her to become the young lady's playmate. She forced herself to stand, trembling, and decided to leave quietly and hide somewhere until the pain passed. But as she rushed toward the exit, she bumped into someone. When she looked up, she found herself in Rahel's arms. For a moment, she froze in shock. Then she quickly greeted the young lady and introduced herself as the new playmate starting today. Rahel said nothing. She silently walked past her, sat at the table, and remained cold and distant. Vivian felt a wave of unease. Was the villainess's hostility toward the heroine truly inevitable? Then she noticed something strange. The intense pain that had been crushing her heart just moments ago was gone. Completely gone. Usually, even when the worst of the pain faded, a dull ache remained. But this time, after merely brushing against Rahel, it had vanished instantly. Vivian was stunned. She realized it at once. Rahel was her cure. Her eyes lit up with determination. She had found her precious treasure. From that moment on, she resolved to become Rahel's best friend no matter what. With gratitude and excitement, Vivian declared that she admired Rahel and promised to make her happy from now on. Rahel's response was cold and merciless. She looked at Vivian without warmth and told her never to come back. Vivian's world shattered in an instant. She couldn't process the rejection. Tears streamed down her face as she cried, feeling her dream of living a long, healthy life collapse. But amid her despair, a spark of defiance ignited in her eyes. It would not end like this. She reminded herself of her principle. If you hit a tree 10 times and it doesn't fall, you hit it an 11th time. She would endure. She would persist. A few days later, it was time for tea with Rahel again. Vivian was determined to apply her hit-the-tree principle. She sat and waited. 30 minutes passed. Rahel didn't appear. Vivian began to worry. She remembered Rahel's cruel words about not returning and wondered if she was being intentionally ignored. Then she heard footsteps. She turned, hopeful. But it was only Sally. Sally approached with a mocking smile, clearly enjoying herself. She greeted Vivian in a fake childish tone, and then insulted her, saying it was no surprise an uneducated girl lacked taste. Sally asked if she knew why her lady hadn't come. Then she answered her own question. Rahel, she claimed, saw someone like Vivian as beneath her level, and didn't wish to play with her. She arrogantly advised Vivian to take the hint and leave, saying naive children were annoying. Vivian pretended to look sad. Then she smiled brightly and said she would prefer to hear that directly from the young lady. Sally was taken aback. Vivian calmly explained that if what Sally said was true, she would go home. But if it was a lie, she leaned closer and whispered that Sally would become a rude child who disobeyed the Duke's orders by sending her away. Sally panicked and shouted that she wasn't lying. Vivian calmly questioned whether that was really true. Then she declared she would confirm it herself. Without hesitation, she dashed into the mansion while Sally tried and failed to stop her. Vivian ran through the hallways shouting that she wouldn't give up. She was determined to see Rahel today. Finally, she reached a staircase and saw Rahel standing at the top. At that very moment, Sally caught up and rushed forward, claiming she had tried to stop Vivian but that she insisted on meeting her. Rahel looked at both girls coldly and asked Vivian why she had come. Vivian felt frustrated by her icy tone, but she had prepared a backup plan. She pretended innocence and said she knew tea time must be boring, so she suggested they try something more fun, a tour around the city. Before Rahel could respond, Sally quickly interrupted, claiming that her lady hated leaving the mansion. She urged Rahel to confirm it. Vivian watched Rahel carefully, but she knew the truth. From the original novel, she knew Rahel actually longed to go outside. Rahel was the daughter of the late crown prince who had died, branded a traitor. Her mother was Lady Acella, the Duke's daughter. Officially, the emperor could not punish Rahel, the Duke's illegitimate granddaughter. But everyone in the empire understood that didn't mean forgiveness. Because of that, Rahel had lived quietly, avoiding attention. She stayed confined within the mansion, hiding her existence as if she were already dead, waiting for the world to forget her. Vivian believed those suppressed feelings would eventually turn into rebellion. But here in this town, there was no emperor watching. No one knew Rahel's true identity. There was no reason for her to hide. Vivian gently reached out her hand again and softly asked if Rahel wanted to go to the city with her. Rahel hesitated. Before she could answer, a woman's voice interrupted, saying that would be difficult. Sally ran happily to her mother. Vivian immediately recognized the woman as Margaret Hayes, Rahel's nanny. Margaret informed them that the young lady had another engagement today. Vivian felt irritated. The nanny was making decisions without even asking Rahel, all under the excuse of protection. Vivian argued that there was still time. They could have tea and return before the next appointment. Margaret replied sharply that going out today was impossible and asked if her words were unclear. Vivian didn't back down. With a bright smile, she asked if it would be acceptable if she received the Duke's permission. Margaret exploded, declaring that she was responsible for the young lady's education and that her will was the Duke's will. At that very moment, the Duke himself appeared and calmly asked if he had ever forbidden the child from going out. Margaret became flustered and tried to explain she was only concerned for her lady's safety. The Duke replied that if safety was the issue, they could simply assign more guards. Then he turned to Rahel and said that if she wished to go, she could, as long as she returned before sunset. Margaret attempted to object again, mentioning an etiquette lesson. The Duke interrupted her and postponed the lesson until tomorrow. He ordered Butler Owen to prepare a carriage. Vivian felt a surge of triumph. She wondered to herself if this was what power felt like. She realized Sally and her mother had only wanted to push her away, so she decided to take an even bigger risk. She ran toward the Duke and called out to him. After bowing respectfully, she said she had wanted to greet him earlier, but didn't want to disturb him. The Duke replied that he believed they had already exchanged greetings. Vivian smiled and said this was her first greeting as the young lady's official playmate. She added that her father taught her to properly introduce herself when visiting a friend's home for the first time. Then she boldly asked if she could have dinner with them that evening. The air froze. An awkward silence filled the space. Margaret grabbed Vivian and scolded her, saying they should never have brought an uneducated commoner child into the mansion. But the Duke suddenly burst into laughter. He said he saw no reason not to invite his granddaughter's friend for dinner. Then he ordered Owen to prepare a banquet. Vivian clenched her fists and shouted in excitement. Her plan had worked perfectly. Vivian believed she had secured both a dinner invitation and Rahel's first outing. But she was wrong. Rahel calmly announced from her room that she would not go. Vivian stood up in shock and asked why. She tried persuading her, insisting there had to be a reason and promising she would solve any problem. Rahel replied that the city was noisy and chaotic. She hated crowded places. Vivian immediately understood. Rahel wasn't afraid of noise. She was afraid of people's gazes. She feared being recognized as the traitor's daughter and whispered about behind her back. Vivian confidently declared that this was something she could handle. She asked Rahel to trust her. The next day, instead of going into town, Vivian led Rahel and the guards up a rugged path toward a green hill. When they finally reached the top, the guards looked exhausted. Vivian innocently asked if they had eaten too little bread that day and cheerfully said she would ask the Duke to provide them with more. The guards panicked instantly at the thought of her telling the Duke they were tired. They imagined being questioned for weakness or neglecting their duties. Immediately, they straightened up and insisted they were perfectly fine, urging her to continue. At the hilltop, Vivian stood under a large tree and told Rahel she could see the entire village from there. Rahel looked out. From above, the village looked peaceful, like a painting. It was the first time she had seen it from outside the mansion walls. She realized she had truly stepped beyond her confinement. While Rahel quietly took in the view, Vivian suddenly threw herself onto the grass and rolled down the hill laughing. Rahel and the guards rushed after her in alarm. But Vivian was laughing brightly, completely unbothered. One guard asked if she was hurt. Rahel stared at her in disbelief. The children she knew in the capital behaved like miniature adults. They read quietly and acted refined. Even Vivian herself had shown extreme politeness and intelligence in front of the Duke. But now, she was playing freely, rolling in the grass without care. Rahel couldn't decide if she was foolish or simply innocent. She admitted to herself that Vivian was truly strange. When Vivian returned, her clothes were covered in dirt. Rahel pointed it out. Vivian cheerfully shook off the dust and said it wasn't a problem. Then she invited Rahel to try rolling down the hill too, insisting that since she came all the way here, she should experience it. Rahel refused calmly and told her to continue alone. Vivian felt slightly disappointed but didn't push further. Instead, she began pointing toward the village below. She explained that the red roof was the fruit shop, the building in front was the general store, the green roof belonged to the bookstore, and next to it was a restaurant with delicious food. Rahel quietly wondered how a commoner child could shine so brightly. Suddenly, Vivian reached out and touched Rahel's face, making her flustered. Vivian excitedly said that next time, they would walk through the village together. Rahel was unexpectedly moved. For the first time, she glimpsed something unfamiliar: freedom. a freedom this bright, confident child possessed naturally, a freedom Rahel herself had never known. For the first time, Rahel felt something unfamiliar. This small, seemingly insignificant child standing beside her suddenly looked like the true owner of this little world, and that realization stirred a quiet envy inside her. Vivian interrupted her thoughts by pointing at the sunset. Rahel looked toward the horizon. A faint desire rose within her, a longing to taste even a little of that freedom. On the carriage ride back, Vivian eagerly asked Rahel if she had enjoyed the outing. Rahel stayed silent. Vivian sighed, assuming her prickly lady disliked it, even though she had carefully chosen a place with no crowds. Suddenly, Rahel reached out and placed her hand on Vivian's head. Vivian blinked in confusion. Then she felt something. A leaf. She pulled it out and realized it had been stuck in her hair. She remembered the guards laughing earlier, and understood why. She shouted at Rahel, asking why she hadn't told her sooner. Rahel replied faintly that she should be grateful she told her before meeting her grandfather. Vivian froze. For a split second, she thought Rahel had smiled, but she immediately dismissed it. It was impossible for someone that cold to smile at her. As they approached the mansion, Vivian grew nervous. Dinner with the Duke awaited them. At the table, the tension was obvious. Vivian knew from the original novel that Rahel and her grandfather did not have a good relationship, but she had believed their bond deteriorated after Rahel walked the path of evil. She hadn't realized it was already strained since childhood. The silence felt heavy. Vivian decided to break it. She thanked the Duke for allowing them to go out. The Duke asked with interest where they had gone. Vivian enthusiastically explained that they chose the back hill because they didn't have much time, and from there, they could see the entire village. The Duke praised her cleverness in choosing an efficient solution without delaying dinner. But Vivian wanted him to acknowledge something else, that his granddaughter had stepped outside for the first time in a long while. She suddenly wondered aloud whether he might ask Rahel if she enjoyed herself. Then she playfully suggested that next time they all visit the village together. The Duke replied coldly that he would join if he had time. Silence returned. Vivian felt suffocated by it. She believed Rahel's emotional health depended on being close to her only family. If she wanted to prevent Rahel's descent into gloom, she needed to understand why this cold distance existed between them. Before she could think further, the butler Owen suddenly entered the dining hall without knocking. The Duke looked surprised. Owen apologized and informed him that an inspector from the Imperial Palace had arrived. The Duke stiffened. Meanwhile, at Vivian's bakery, Diaz was startled when 3 men in official uniforms entered. He told them the shop was closed. One stepped forward and asked directly if he was Diaz Hessen, father of Vivian Hessen. Diaz felt his heart drop. From their uniforms and tone, he recognized them as Imperial Knights. Fear gripped him. Had they discovered Vivian's true identity? The knight repeated his question, asking again if he was Diaz Hessen. Diaz concealed his tension and calmly asked why they had come, while quietly gripping a knife behind his back. The knight introduced himself as Curtis Rohan of the Imperial Knights and said he needed to speak with Vivian. Diaz felt a chill run down his spine. Why would the Imperial Palace be looking for his daughter? Curtis explained that he had heard Vivian was Lady Edelyn's playmate and had a few questions to ask her. Diaz felt slight relief. They weren't here for her identity, at least not directly. Still, he had to be careful. It was fortunate Vivian wasn't home. He began apologizing, preparing to say she was out. At that exact moment, the bakery door flew open. Vivian walked in cheerfully, announcing that she was back. Diaz froze. Vivian stepped inside happily, then stopped cold. Several large, intimidating men were surrounding her father. For a split second, she thought they were thieves. Curtis stepped forward and asked if she was Vivian. She noticed he was smiling with his mouth, but not with his eyes. She remembered her father once warning her about people who smiled like that. She answered confidently that she was. Curtis introduced himself again and said they were there on the Emperor's orders. When Vivian saw the crest on his uniform, she recognized it instantly. Her father had shown it to her before. He had warned her that if she ever saw that symbol, she should stay far away. powerful nobles could punish someone even without reason, and the closer they were to the emperor, the worse the consequences. She suddenly remembered the Duke's tense reaction when news of the Imperial inspector arrived during dinner. It clicked. These men were here to gather information about Rahel. Curtis asked her to step outside and talk privately. Diaz immediately stepped in front of her and said they could speak here. Curtis mocked him, asking if he truly believed an Imperial knight would kidnap a child. Diaz calmly replied that he assumed Curtis was unmarried and that this was simply how fathers with daughters felt. Curtis's expression hardened. He warned Diaz that Imperial orders were not to be disobeyed, and defiance could be considered treason. Vivian felt her heart pound. If a fight broke out, her father would lose. Despite his build, he wasn't a fighter. She realized she had to protect him. Vivian stepped forward and asked what the knight wanted to discuss. Curtis said he heard she was the young lady's playmate and hoped to ask her a few questions. That confirmed everything. She couldn't betray Rahel. Then she noticed something else. All the knights seemed unmarried. She chose her weapon carefully. Exhaustion. She began answering their questions with endless counter-questions, especially why. The knights soon showed visible fatigue as she surrounded them with innocent curiosity. One of them let slip that the emperor was not on good terms with the lady, which was why they couldn't ask her directly. Vivian widened her eyes and asked why. The knight hesitated. Another quickly corrected the statement, claiming the emperor was benevolent and merely concerned about the lady's well-being since she had moved far away. Vivian pretended to accept that explanation. Then she shifted tactics. She innocently asked that if the emperor cared about all his subjects, why hadn't he shown interest in her and her father before, since they were also his subjects? The knight faltered. He quickly insisted that of course the emperor cared about them too, and then awkwardly returned to asking about her relationship with the young lady. Vivian realized the knight was sharp. He kept steering the conversation back to Rahel, so she used her final tactic. She began bragging non-stop. She talked about leading the neighborhood children, about exploring the forest, even about visiting a so-called haunted house to test her courage. The knight suddenly interrupted her, asking anxiously whether the lady had gone to that haunted house with her. Vivian immediately denied it, saying Rahel wasn't even in the village at that time. The knight snapped, demanding why she was rambling about unrelated things. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. She said sadly that they were the ones who asked how she was doing. Then she pouted and declared she wouldn't say anything else. The knight softened slightly and clarified that he only wanted to know whether her relationship with the lady was good. Then he asked directly whether she had ever seen the lady use magic. Vivian understood instantly. That was the real question. The Hildian Empire's first emperor had been a powerful magician. Since then, imperial descendants were born with immense mana, and the throne went to the strongest among them. But sometimes, a descendant rebelled. Rahel's father had done exactly that. A powerful magician. He had coveted the throne and was executed for treason. Since then, the emperor kept Rahel under surveillance, fearing she might inherit her father's power and rebel as well. Vivian feigned ignorance and said she hadn't seen anything like that. The knight pressed her to think carefully. Before she could answer further, her father stepped in firmly and declared that was enough. He said the knight would not get the answers he wanted from a 9-year-old child. The knight was clearly frustrated, but warned Diaz not to speak about today's events. Then he paused and studied Diaz's face. He said he looked familiar and asked if they had met before. Diaz smiled calmly and said it was their first meeting. Vivian found that strange. Her father's face wasn't easily forgettable. The knights eventually left. As soon as they were gone, Diaz told Vivian not to visit the Duke's mansion for a while. He said the butler had mentioned there were guests. Vivian felt uneasy. The Imperial Palace appeared right after she became Rahel's playmate. It couldn't be a coincidence. She worried the Duke might suspect her involvement. Frustrated, she thought hard about how to remove any suspicion. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. She exclaimed that she found a solution. She knelt briefly near her father as he prepared dinner, then rushed to the basement. If she showed the Duke that item, his suspicions would disappear completely. A week passed. Rahel sat by her window, bored and weary. She told herself Vivian was no different from the others. She remembered how other children once sent letters full of flimsy excuses, sick relatives, newborn siblings, to explain why they couldn't visit. At first, she believed them. Then her nanny revealed the truth. No one wanted to approach the traitor's daughter. They feared punishment from the emperor. Her nanny had promised that she and Sally would stay by her side forever. After that, Rahel stopped expecting anything from anyone. Still, she remembered Vivian's bright voice declaring admiration. She knew Vivian would eventually leave, too. She told herself she should be used to it, yet she felt strangely upset. As she sat in her room lost in thought, she heard a knock at the door. She wondered quietly if Vivian had come. The door opened, but it wasn't Vivian. It was Sally. She walked in with fake sweetness and asked if Rahel was reading again. She approached the bookshelf and suggested Rahel take a break, insisting it wasn't time for studying. Then she excitedly offered to play with dolls or do role-playing together. Rahel ignored her completely. She turned her back and calmly picked a book from the shelf. Sally stood there, confused and irritated by the blatant disregard. Rahel had always been quiet, but not this cold. Sally's mind drifted back to the day on the stairs when Vivian had spoken to Rahel. She blamed everything on that annoying village peasant. Trying to provoke her, Sally mockingly asked if Rahel was happy that Vivian had stopped coming. She added that the girl's presence had only interfered with her reading anyway. She continued bitterly, claiming Vivian had only pretended to be kind and that she knew from the start that someone like her would run away soon. Then she promised she would stay by Rahel's side forever. Rahel cut her off. In an icy tone, she told her to leave. Sally froze, confused. Rahel repeated it sharply, saying she was extremely annoying. Sally left trembling with rage. Outside, she kicked a flower pot in anger and screamed that everything was Vivian's fault. Then her true feelings surfaced. She wondered how that peasant dared try to seduce the person who would become her husband. She remembered a past conversation with her mother. Her mother had once explained that although her mistress currently lived as a girl due to circumstances, when she grew up, she would become a man and marry Sally. Young Sally had asked in surprise if she would really marry Rahel. Her mother had confirmed it and said that was why they stayed close to her. Sally snapped back to the present and shouted that no matter what Vivian did, Rahel would eventually marry her. Suddenly, a man's voice called out from behind her. She froze. The man stepped closer and asked her calmly what story she had just mentioned. With a sly smile, he clarified that he wanted to know more about how the young lady, who was currently a girl, could become her husband in the future. Later that night, Butler Owen reported to the Duke that the Imperial inspectors would return to the capital in 2 days. The Duke was surprised. He had expected them to stay at least a month after traveling so far. He thought to himself that while it appeared to be a routine inspection of a noble who moved to the countryside, the real purpose was clearly surveillance. He picked up the report in front of him. Their sudden withdrawal made him uneasy. He remembered his late daughter's final request on her deathbed. She had begged him to protect Rahitas and her child. His expression hardened. He ordered tighter security around the villa. Then Owen informed him that he had gathered information about Vivian Hessen and her father, Diaz Hessen. The Duke couldn't ignore the strange timing. The Imperial inspectors arrived the same moment that Child entered his mansion. That coincidence was far too suspicious. The Duke admitted that he had been the one to bring the child into the mansion, which made any connection to the Emperor unlikely. Still, since he had already begun investigating, he preferred certainty. Butler Owen began presenting his findings. Vivian's father was named Diaz Hessen. He was 29 years old and ran a bakery in the village. He maintained a friendly relationship with the locals. The Duke asked about his wife. Owen replied that she reportedly died 5 years ago, before Diaz and his daughter settled in the village. He added that Diaz had not originally been a baker, and no one knew anything about his past. The Duke then asked whether any of the Emperor's men had contacted Diaz. Owen explained that on the day the inspectors arrived, the Imperial Knights visited the bakery. However, based on reports, they obtained little information and had made no further contact. Then Owen added that there was something else. He placed a pink notebook with a rabbit design on the Duke's desk. It looked like a child's diary. Owen explained that it was a report from Vivian addressed to His Excellency. In it, she mentioned observing and analyzing the Imperial Knights. The Duke was surprised. How could a child do that? And why would she care about the Knights? Owen recalled the moment Vivian handed him the notebook. When he asked her why she wanted to give it to the Duke, she had smiled brightly and said she was, of course, on the Duke's side. Owen finished by saying that the child appeared to be loyal to them. The Duke opened the notebook. Inside was indeed a childish diary. Vivian had written that after eating a delicious feast, she met 3 knights. She described them in simple terms: one large, one thin, and the leader medium-sized. She recorded that the knights asked whether the young lady was well and whether she had ever seen her use magic. She also noted that later she saw them questioning the general store owner about goods delivered to the mansion, asking whether any strange items were included. A faint smile appeared on the Duke's face. He had sensed it from the beginning. The child was quick-witted and naturally skilled at navigating difficult situations. He considered her a useful asset. Without hesitation, he ordered Owen to summon Vivian. The next day, Vivian hurried toward the mansion, wondering how Rahel was. She told herself Rahel probably wasn't waiting for her, yet she couldn't help longing to see her. When she arrived, she spotted Rahel from a distance and waved enthusiastically, calling out to her. Rahel turned away as if she hadn't heard. Vivian frowned in confusion and ran after her, calling again. When she caught up, Rahel faced her with a cold expression. She sharply asked why she had returned. Then she asked if Vivian had come to bid farewell like the others. She told her to go back where she came from, because she didn't need such things. Vivian froze at the word farewell. Rahel accused her of being afraid too, afraid that staying close to the trader's daughter would bring harm to her and her family. In that moment, Vivian understood. This was how all of Rahel's past friends had left her. Rahel believed she would be abandoned again, just because Vivian hadn't visited for a few days. Vivian realized that fear of being hurt again had sealed Rahel's heart. Even if she was destined to be the villainess, she was still just a child terrified of abandonment. Vivian made up her mind. She would tell Rahel the truth, that she was not afraid and had never intended to leave her. When Vivian caught up to Rahel again, Rahel stopped and looked at her cautiously. Vivian told herself that if Rahel stepped away, she would simply close the distance again. As Rahel turned and walked off, Vivian followed cheerfully, insisting they go together. She was determined to stay by her side until she earned her trust. Later, Vivian watched Rahel train with a wooden sword. Rahel struck the practice dummy over and over without stopping. Vivian noticed the fatigue mixed with determination on her face. She worried Rahel was pushing herself too hard. Suddenly, the wooden sword snapped from the force of her strikes. A fragment cut Rahel's face. Vivian screamed her name and ran toward her. She saw blood and asked anxiously if she was okay. But Rahel recoiled sharply and pushed her hand away, shouting at her to stay back. Vivian froze in shock. Rahel stood and ran off. Vivian called after her, determined to clear the misunderstanding and prove she would never leave her. At that moment, a violent wave of pain from mana overload struck her. She dropped to her knees, clutching her chest. She collapsed, gasping for air. Even through the pain, her only thought was catching up to Rahel. She whispered that the pain was unbearable. She knew that if she touched Rahel, the pain would disappear. But she refused. After realizing Rahel's emotional wounds, she couldn't use her as a cure anymore. She chose to endure it. She forced herself to stand, focused only on reaching Rahel before she hurt herself further. Her vision blurred. She faintly heard someone calling her name. Then everything went dark. Before losing consciousness, she felt someone lift her. It was Rahel. After hearing her fall, Rahel had turned back. As she carried her, memories surfaced. Rahel had decided earlier to cut ties before growing too attached. She believed Vivian would eventually abandon her out of fear. She wanted to give up first to avoid being hurt again. But when she saw Vivian lying unconscious, it dragged her back to childhood, to the day she saw her mother collapse, and desperately tried to wake her. The memory faded. Rahel ran desperately, shouting Vivian's name. She sat beside her bed, begging her to open her eyes. She whispered that she would accept a farewell if needed. Vivian could leave. She only wanted her to live. Sir Brian burst into the room, shocked, asking what had happened. Everyone had assumed Rahel was the one who fainted. Rahel ignored him and quietly begged him to save Vivian. She pleaded again, her voice filled with despair. Sir Brian was stunned. It was the first time he had seen his young master like this since Lady Acella's death. Even at his mother's funeral, he had not shed tears. Sir Brian felt relief seeing him show emotion again. But he also knew this was dangerous, not only because of Vivian's condition, but because this could reopen deep trauma in his young master. Sir Brian placed his medical bag on the floor and prepared to examine the child. He approached Rahel, who was sitting anxiously beside the bed, and after a quick look at Vivian, reassured her that the condition did not appear critical at first glance. He told her he would begin the examination immediately. He leaned over Vivian and started checking her pulse and breathing. At that moment, the door opened slowly. Margaret, the nanny, entered and calmly informed Rahel that it was time for her etiquette lesson. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the unconscious child on the bed and the doctor beside her. She asked what had happened. Sir Brian explained that Vivian had suddenly collapsed. There were no visible external injuries, but he needed to examine her thoroughly to be sure. A subtle smile flickered across the nanny's face, not of concern, but something else. She approached Rahel and placed a hand on her shoulder, saying she looked pale and should rest. Rahel refused immediately. She declared she would stay until the examination was finished. Margaret's expression tightened. She replied that if staying made her comfortable, she would postpone the etiquette lesson until tomorrow. Rahel quietly thanked her. As Margaret walked out, anger brewed inside her. She believed Rahel's defiance was because of that little nuisance. She admitted to herself that she had disliked the child for some time, and this situation worked in her favor. If the child was truly ill, it would be the perfect excuse to send her away permanently. Her plan to control Rahel had started 5 years ago, on the day Lady Acella died. She remembered frightening young Rahel constantly, telling him that if he left the mansion, the Emperor would resent him, and others would follow. She had planted fear in him, warning that if his true identity as a male were revealed, everyone in the mansion would be in danger. Even the Duke might abandon him to protect the family. After instilling fear, she would always reassure him that she and her daughter Sally would remain by his side forever. She believed controlling a helpless child was easy. Her goal was simple. Even if Rahel lived as a girl now, he could not hide his identity forever. As he grew stronger, the Duke would eventually end the disguise and reveal him as the future Duke Edelin. The Duke was already secretly training him in magic. And when that day came, if only she and Sally were close to him, Sally could become the future Duchess. But that commoner child had disrupted everything. She had gained the Duke's favor and even convinced Rahel to step outside the mansion, something no one else had achieved. Margaret smiled faintly. If the girl were truly sick, she would have no choice but to return home. She had planned to frighten her away as she had done with others. But this situation was even better. Margaret went directly to the Duke's office and knocked. She informed him that the playmate he had brought had suddenly collapsed. She added that Sir Brian was examining her and that Rahel insisted on staying by her side, so she allowed it. Then she continued her plan, speaking with carefully disguised concern, saying she hoped it was nothing serious. The nanny added that if the child were suffering from a serious illness, it might cause great sadness to her young mistress. The Duke understood her implication immediately. She was subtly suggesting that separating Vivian from Rahel would be for the best, and there was logic in it. Rahel, despite being young, already understood death after losing his mother. If Vivian were to die, it could shatter him completely. As the Duke fell into deep thought, the nanny left with a faint smile of satisfaction. Meanwhile, Vivian slowly regained consciousness. She opened her eyes weakly, confused about where she was. The bed felt unfamiliar. Then she remembered the sharp pain in her chest. chasing Rahel, and darkness. She suddenly sat up in panic, realizing she had fainted. Her first instinct was to check on Rahel, but when she turned, she saw Rahel sitting quietly beside her bed. Vivian froze in surprise. Had she stayed the entire time? Rahel's face was pale, her eyes filled with worry as she asked softly if she was okay. Vivian was stunned. She had never seen Rahel look so concerned. She quickly apologized and tried to reassure her. She explained that her illness wasn't serious and that she had been dealing with it for years. Rahel asked in shock if she had been sick for years. Vivian realized too late that she had exposed her secret. She had planned to reveal it later, after earning Rahel's trust. Now she feared rejection. She whispered to herself that everything was over. She saw what she thought was anger on Rahel's face. But Rahel's next question wasn't angry. She asked whether Vivian fainted every time the pain came. Vivian hurriedly denied it. She explained that this was the first time she lost consciousness, and that the pain usually lasted about 20 minutes before fading. Rahel's voice trembled as she asked if Vivian had already been in pain before approaching her earlier. Vivian hesitated, afraid this confession would cost her everything. But Rahel surprised her. In a low, self-blaming tone, she asked why Vivian hadn't told her. She admitted she thought Vivian had collapsed because of her. Vivian realized then that Rahel had been genuinely terrified. In that moment, the future villainess disappeared. Before her was simply a child with a fragile heart, sincerely worried about her friend. Vivian understood that Rahel was no longer just a character in a novel. She was her friend. So she decided to tell the truth. She explained that she endured the pain because she had something important to say. Vivian held Rahel's hand tightly. She told her sincerely that she was not afraid of her, even if she was the daughter of a traitor, because she had done nothing wrong. She said it was unfair for someone to be treated badly without fault. And when a friend is treated unfairly, one should not run away, but stay, trust, and help them. She promised firmly that she would stay by her side. Rahel sat in stunned silence. Before Vivian could finish speaking, there was a knock at the door. Butler Owen requested permission to enter. Rahel allowed it. The door opened, and Owen stepped in, followed by the nanny Margaret. Vivian immediately felt uneasy. Vivian felt her heart tighten the moment Butler Owen and the nanny entered together. She immediately assumed they had come to scold her for hiding her illness. But Owen spoke gently, asking how she felt after fainting. Vivian replied that she was fine and thanked the young lady for quickly calling the doctor. She could sense the butler's relief, but the nanny's expression was different. There was something hidden behind it. It gave Vivian a bad feeling. Owen then suggested that, as a precaution, it would be best for her to rest at home for a while. Exhaustion during illness could make things worse. Vivian's heart dropped. She asked if that meant she shouldn't visit the mansion for the time being. Owen confirmed it, adding that they would provide full support for her recovery. Vivian understood immediately. Though his words sounded considerate, the real intention was to distance her from Rahel. A sick child with an unknown illness was a risk to the Duke's household. She glanced at the nanny, who stood confidently. Now she understood that earlier look of victory. But instead of despair, a faint smile appeared on Vivian's face. Her illness could actually benefit Rahel. If the Duke's family learned the truth about mana overload, they would have every reason to keep her close to Rahel. The problem was proving it. Diagnosing a mana-related illness required someone who could read mana. It was complicated and risky. If handled poorly, she might simply be expelled. Still, she decided to take the chance. At that moment, Sir Brian burst into the room, calling out to Rahel excitedly. He apologized for the interruption and announced he had identified the child's illness. Owen asked if he was certain. Sir Brian confirmed it and added that it was not contagious. Everyone focused on him. With a confident smile, he declared that her symptoms perfectly matched a rare condition known as mana overload. Vivian nearly burst with joy. She needed an expert, and she got one. In contrast, anger flickered across the nanny's face. Vivian quietly thought that this was simply the nanny's bad luck. Sir Brian assured Vivian that they could treat her condition. She excitedly praised him as the best doctor ever. Later in the Duke's office, Owen confirmed that Sir Brian had diagnosed the illness as mana overload with certainty. As someone capable of reading mana, there was no mistake. The Duke gave clear instructions. Vivian was to be told that they knew a way to ease her symptoms, but she was not to learn about Rahel's special ability to absorb mana. The Duke reflected on the strange coincidence. In the very village they chose to hide Rahel's power, there lived a child with a rare condition that could strengthen that power. And that child had become Rahel's playmate. The coincidence was almost suspicious. But he chose to believe that sometimes life simply brought unexpected fortune. Owen added that the young lady seemed to have grown fond of Vivian. The Duke was surprised. He had only brought Vivian into the mansion to serve as a distraction, to conceal the truth that Rahel was a boy. He had never expected them to bond this way. He looked out the window. Outside, he saw Diaz carrying Vivian toward the carriage. He had come immediately after hearing she fainted. As the Duke watched him, something about the father's face felt strangely familiar. He was certain they had never met. Yet there was something in his features that stirred an uneasy sense of recognition. The Duke kept thinking about Vivian's father. The more he looked at Diaz, the more he felt a strange familiarity. His mind drifted back to a battlefield lit by magic, to a white-haired man standing in the glow of combat. For a brief moment, he wondered if Diaz resembled that man. But he dismissed the thought. That man was dead. Under those circumstances, it was impossible. Still, just to be safe, he ordered Butler Owen to investigate Diaz Hessen's past more thoroughly as the carriage left. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Vivian was overflowing with joy. Everything had gone exactly as planned. Most importantly, she had become Rahel's true friend. She promised herself she would earn Rahel's full trust and make her happy. Suddenly, she felt a sharp gaze on her. She turned and froze. Her father was sitting in front of her without his glasses. For a moment, she didn't even recognize him. He looked unexpectedly handsome. She asked why he wasn't wearing them. He replied playfully that he had forgotten them in his distraction and joked that no wonder people were staring at him. Vivian teased back, asking what would happen if she started charming men too. But despite the light tone, she noticed something. His eyes were trembling. Her father had always been terrified whenever she was in pain. She remembered him telling her long ago that her mother died from illness when she was very young, and that his own family had cut ties with him even before he married her. She was the only family he had left. He must have been deeply shaken when he heard she fainted. Unable to hold back, Vivian leaned forward and hugged him tightly. She told him not to worry. She promised she would follow the doctor's instructions and recover quickly. She said she would stay with him for a very long time. Her father hugged her back. His voice sounded strained, as if holding back tears. Vivian pretended not to notice. It would be embarrassing for a grown man to cry. She told herself that the tight feeling in her chest wasn't because she was moved. For her father's sake, the man who had only her in this world, she decided she would turn this story into a happy ending, no matter what. A few days later, things at the Duke's mansion returned to normal. Except for one change. When Vivian arrived, Rahel was waiting outside. Vivian smiled playfully and asked if she had been waiting for her. Rahel immediately denied it. Vivian stepped closer and whispered teasingly that she was sure she had been waiting. Rahel insisted she hadn't, but Vivian knew the truth. She continued teasing, saying she really looked like she had been waiting, and asked why she was outside. After a brief silence, Rahel replied awkwardly that she had only come out to tell her to go straight to the mansion instead of the greenhouse. Vivian thought it was a weak excuse. She could have sent a maid, so why come herself? She was certain Rahel had been waiting, just too shy to admit it. Deciding not to press further, Vivian cheerfully asked what they would play today. Rahel replied that she hadn't decided yet. As they walked together, Vivian suddenly suggested they visit the library. She excitedly explained that she had seen it before, and that it looked enormous. She wanted to explore it properly from the inside. In her excitement, Vivian grabbed Rahel's hand without thinking. The moment she realized it, she froze. Panic surged through her mind. She wondered what she had just done. Last time, Rahel might have allowed it because she had fainted. What if she pulled away now? Vivian tried to stay calm and act natural. Before anything could happen, Butler Owen appeared and announced that it was time for her meeting. Vivian turned toward him, greeted him politely, and answered enthusiastically when he asked how she was feeling. Owen nodded, then informed her seriously that the Duke wished to see her. Vivian was stunned. Soon she found herself sitting across from the Duke for the first time, watching him sip tea in silence. She reminded herself not to show weakness. After a pause, the Duke asked whether she knew what the Emperor thought of Rahel. Vivian replied that her lady had told her some things. The Duke interrupted, clarifying that he wasn't referring to that. He asked whether she had already known about the tension between him and the Emperor before speaking with Rahel. Vivian understood. He was referring to the report she had given him. She remembered the 3 knights who had questioned her about Rahel and magic. She realized this was not a man she could deceive. Lying would only trap her. So she admitted that she had overheard villagers discussing the matter. The Duke then asked directly what her opinion of the Emperor was. The question caught her off guard. She knew the Duke and the Emperor were enemies. But openly criticizing the Emperor might be dangerous. She chose her words carefully. She said she wasn't sure, as she had never met the Emperor in person. The Duke's gaze sharpened. He said she had not been summoned to give a lukewarm answer. Vivian gathered her courage. She said she had learned not to judge someone based solely on rumors. But there was one thing she was certain of. It was wrong to punish a child for a parent's sins. That was why she chose to stay by her lady's side. The Duke asked with a faint smile whether she pitied that child. Vivian hesitated, wondering if it was inappropriate for a commoner to say she pitied a noble. The Duke then said he liked people who held firm to their convictions. He had enough dogs who wagged their tails to please him. He wanted a human, someone who could disagree, suggest another path, or stop him when he was wrong. He looked at her with approval and told her she had made a strong impression on him. The Duke then announced seriously that he had decided to become her patron. Vivian froze in shock. She could barely process his words. The Duke explained that when nobles find a promising seed, they nurture it from a young age. He wanted her to become someone useful to him, and eventually to Rahel as well. That meant daily lessons at the villa. He asked quietly if she hated the idea. Vivian answered instantly. She didn't hate it at all. She wanted it very much. A faint smile appeared on the Duke's face. She promised she would do her best. The moment she left his office, she exploded with joy. She spun and danced in the hallway, unable to contain her happiness. Being acknowledged felt incredible. Her celebration was cut short when Rahel suddenly appeared and asked what she was doing. Vivian rushed to her and hugged her tightly. She excitedly told her that the Duke had become her patron, which meant they could study together every day. Wasn't that wonderful? Rahel looked confused. Her face turned slightly red. Vivian touched her cheek, asking if she felt sick. Rahel shyly stepped back and told her to keep some distance. Vivian quickly apologized, saying she was just too happy. Rahel replied that it was good news anyway. Vivian teased her, asking if she was happy too. Rahel stayed silent. Vivian changed the topic and asked again if she had been waiting for her. Rahel calmly said she was heading to the library. Then she reached out her hand, reminding Vivian that she had wanted to see it. Vivian was stunned. Rahel had reached out first. Rahel teased that she could forget it if she didn't want to go. Vivian immediately grabbed her hand and said she definitely wanted to. As they walked together, she felt the warmth between their interlaced fingers and didn't let go. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, an Imperial aide reported to the Emperor that the newborn was not a daughter, but a son. The young Emperor burst into hysterical laughter. Then his face darkened. He said he had suspected it. The child resembled his father too much. His thoughts drifted back to the past, before he became crown prince, when he tried to kill his younger brother, Leifrid, out of jealousy. Leifrid had always been superior. He remembered watching him drink poison. He had regretted it when Leifrid survived. Worse, Leifrid had pleaded before their father that the throne rightfully belonged to his older brother. That moment filled him with fury. He realized he should have ensured his brother's death. Afraid that Leifrid would eventually reclaim the throne, he decided to eliminate him completely. Now he sat on the throne, stained with blood. He should have been victorious. But his thoughts were interrupted when an assistant entered and reported that Lady Acella, who had once disappeared, had returned with a child. The emperor stiffened. Acella was the woman who had fled just before their engagement, right after Leifrid's death. The emperor's eyes narrowed. If that was Acella's child, could it be? He demanded to know who the father was. The assistant answered that they did not know yet. The emperor shouted that he would see for himself. His memory returned to the day he rushed to Duke Edelin's palace, unable to calm his anxiety. The moment he saw the child, he whispered his dead brother's name in shock. He knew instantly. The child was Leopid's son, the younger brother he had framed for treason and executed. After Rahel's birth, he tried to comfort himself. She was only a girl. She could not threaten his throne. But his brother's ghost haunted him. In his nightmares, Leopid asked why he had been killed after giving up the throne willingly. The emperor screamed, trying to silence the image. Even believing Rahel was a girl never eased his fear. Now he understood why. A ghost had left behind an heir. With cold malice, he decided the heir would die as well. Meanwhile, at the Duke's mansion, the lesson ended. The teacher reminded the girls that review was more important than preparation. Vivian thanked her brightly. Rahel remained quiet. After the teacher left, Rahel calmly said, "Let's go." Vivian walked beside her, feeling they had truly become friends. In the hallway, Rahel teased her. She said Vivian always greeted people enthusiastically, but didn't actually enjoy the lessons. Vivian denied it. Rahel called her a liar. She asked about the drawings Vivian had been making in her notebook earlier. Vivian was shocked. When had she seen that? She quickly claimed she was reviewing art. Rahel wasn't convinced. She mentioned how Vivian had been dozing during philosophy. Vivian realized Rahel had been watching her the entire time. Embarrassed, she begged her not to tell the Duke. Rahel replied that it depended on her behavior. Vivian complained that was unfair. Then she noticed Rahel smiling. She froze. Rahel looked far more beautiful when she smiled. Why had she hidden that smile all this time? But the smile faded quickly. Vivian followed her gaze. The Duke and Butler Owen were descending the stairs. Vivian bowed respectfully and greeted them. The Duke asked about her lessons. She answered enthusiastically, secretly worried Rahel would expose her. But Rahel stayed silent. Vivian wondered if her silence was because of the Duke. The Duke informed Owen they were leaving and allowed the girls to continue playing. Vivian wished them a safe journey. As they watched him leave, Vivian commented that he didn't seem very happy. She hoped their relationship would improve. Rahel was his only family. Trying to lighten the mood, Vivian suggested they go get snacks. She added playfully that it wasn't like she wanted sweets for herself. The two girls sat on the garden balcony eating sweets. Vivian enjoyed every bite. But she noticed Rahel was eating slowly, distracted. Vivian remembered her true goal. She gently asked if Rahel had any worries. She said friends share what's in their hearts. When one is sad, they comfort each other. When angry, they stand together. They even share secrets. Rahel said she had nothing like that. Vivian thought maybe Rahel wasn't used to talking about her feelings. So she gave an example. She said she had a worry. Her father had cut ties with his family when he married her mother. They opposed the marriage. Whenever she asked about her grandparents, her father only smiled vaguely. She hoped one day they could reconcile. Rahel listened silently. It was a real concern of Vivian's, but she hoped Rahel would connect it to her own strained relationship with the Duke. Rahel surprised her. Maybe, she said, her father feared his family wouldn't accept him. Being family doesn't guarantee forgiveness. If the relationship broke again, it would hurt even more. Vivian realized she had never considered her father's feelings that way. At that moment, she understood. Rahel might fear rejection from her grandfather too. Vivian carefully asked if she had any worries about the Duke. Rahel denied it. Vivian didn't push further. The time wasn't right. She simply said that whenever she felt afraid or troubled, she could talk to her. Rahel asked in surprise, "To you?" "Of course," Vivian said. "We're friends." Friends share happiness and sadness. But she added she didn't need to force herself to talk, just not to bury things when they became too heavy. Their conversation was interrupted by Nanny Margaret, announcing it was time for Rahel's next lesson. Vivian assumed it was the private heir lesson, likely magic training. As Rahel left, Vivian said goodbye, hoping to see her tomorrow. Then she noticed something strange. Margaret did not follow Rahel. Instead, she offered to escort Vivian out. Vivian agreed, though the nanny's faint smile gave her a bad feeling. Margaret led her along a winding path at the edge of the mansion. Suddenly, she stopped. In an icy tone, she asked if Vivian knew the crime of treason. Vivian answered cautiously. Insulting or threatening the Emperor and Imperial family was treason. Margaret said she knew that very well. Did she also know the punishment? The Emperor imposes severe consequences. The punishment extends to the third generation. She described it coldly. The traitor's parents are hanged. The traitor is executed. The traitor's children are sent away as slaves. Anyone who helped the traitor shares the same fate. Vivian was stunned by the brutal explanation. She asked why she was being told this. Margaret answered coldly. Lady Rahel's father committed treason against the Emperor. The nanny spoke slowly. If Vivian stayed close to Rahel, not only she, but her father could be in danger. She claimed she was warning her because she seemed unaware of the truth. In that moment, Vivian understood everything. This was the reason. She remembered Rahel's fear, how she expected to be abandoned to protect others. The nanny had been scaring her all along. She had likely frightened the other children the same way and driven them away. Vivian asked calmly why the nanny herself stayed, if it was so dangerous. Weren't she and Sally at risk too? The nanny replied in a noble tone that she had staked her life to serve the young lady because she believed it was worth it. Then she looked down at Vivian and said she was too young to understand, and that she would regret her decision one day. Vivian answered firmly that she had staked her life too. Then she turned and ran. As she ran, she shouted to herself that she had put her life on the line as well. The nanny stood frozen, shocked, and angry. Vivian made a decision. She had to separate Rahel from that woman. Whether the nanny acted out of protection or ambition, isolating Rahel through fear was wrong. The next day, Vivian took Rahel to the village. Rahel asked why they were there. Vivian said they would buy gifts for the maids from the general store. If Rahel gave them personally, she could grow closer to them. Rahel asked why she needed to grow closer to maids. Vivian replied playfully that then she could secretly request snacks at night. Rahel rejected the idea, saying the maids would still fear her. Vivian admitted that might be true. But if Rahel wanted to rely less on the nanny, she needed other connections in the mansion. She said people fear what they don't understand, like unknown roads or unknown problems. Once they got to know her, they wouldn't be afraid anymore. Vivian grabbed her hand and led her into the store. Inside, Peter, the store owner's son, had been sleeping. He jumped up in panic when they entered. Vivian teased him, saying she would tell his mother he was sleeping on duty. He insisted he was merely contemplating. Vivian laughed and asked who contemplates while snoring. Rahel watched silently. Peter quickly asked what they wanted. Then he whispered to Vivian, asking if the girl with her was the young lady. When she confirmed it, he became visibly nervous and greeted Rahel with a trembling voice. Suddenly, Rahel grabbed Vivian's hand and pulled her away. Peter stood confused, wondering if the young lady disliked strangers. As they walked through the aisles, Vivian pointed out items popular among maids. Rahel asked who that boy was. Vivian said he was Peter, her friend. Rahel asked coldly if he was her close friend too. Vivian sensed the annoyance in her tone. She confirmed that yes, he was a close friend. Rahel suddenly asked if Vivian loved Peter too. Vivian answered innocently that of course she loved him, as a friend. Rahel frowned, clearly annoyed. Then she insisted that Vivian call her by her name too, just like she called Peter. Vivian was shocked. Calling a noble lady by her name directly? Rahel said it was fine, as long as she allowed it. Hesitantly, Vivian agreed and said, "Rahel?" A faint smile appeared on Rahel's face. Vivian realized Rahel wanted to experience what real friends share. Then Rahel added that Vivian could speak to her informally as well. Vivian was overwhelmed. As a commoner, this was a privilege she could not refuse. She agreed enthusiastically, and Rahel looked pleased. Later, in the carriage, Vivian fell asleep and leaned on Rahel's shoulder. Rahel watched her with a soft smile. Vivian was mumbling in her sleep, as if eating something in her dream. Rahel thought about it. This was the first time someone other than her mother or nanny had reached for her hand first, and Vivian had done it more than once. That hand she had always kept away from others, afraid her secret would be exposed. She remembered Vivian's promise to stay by her side, her warm hazel eyes, her soft hand. Rahel didn't want to let go. Vivian was special to her, but she felt a sting of sadness. To Vivian, she was probably just one friend among many. Rahel didn't want to be ordinary. She wanted to be the only one. She wanted Vivian to look only at her, hold only her hand, love only her. Quietly, she whispered that just as Vivian was her only one, she wanted to be Vivian's only one too. She began thinking, maybe they should share a secret. Vivian had said true friends share secrets to grow closer. Doubt crept in. If she revealed that she was actually a boy, would Vivian stay? Vivian had stayed even after learning about the Emperor's surveillance. That gave her hope. Rahel decided she would tell her the truth after she woke up. When they arrived at the mansion, Vivian stepped out, yawning. As they walked toward the entrance, Rahel said she had something important to tell her later. Vivian's curiosity flared. Rahel said she would tell her before she returned home. Vivian begged to know now, but Rahel gently refused. The timing wasn't right. Vivian decided to wait. She had another mission first. Inside the mansion, two maids greeted them respectfully. Vivian nudged Rahel forward and whispered encouragement. Rahel hesitantly responded that she had returned. The maids looked surprised and whispered to each other. Vivian had told Rahel to respond properly and mention the gifts. The first step succeeded. Now Vivian waited eagerly for Rahel to mention the gifts. Rahel became shy and quickly walked away. Vivian sighed. She guessed Rahel was still too embarrassed to mention the gifts. So Vivian stepped in. She called the maids over with a bright smile and announced that the young lady had prepared gifts for them. The maids were stunned. Vivian handed out the cosmetics, explaining they were famous in the village and made the skin soft like a child's. One maid said she had wanted to buy them after hearing Vivian mention them before. Vivian added a small lie, saying Rahel had felt bad earlier and wanted to thank them for their hard work. Rahel looked shocked, clearly wondering when she had said that. The maids were deeply touched. They thanked their mistress warmly and promised to work harder. Rahel stood silently, surprised by the reaction. Vivian felt a quiet sadness. It meant Rahel had never expected her relationship with others to improve even a little. Later, as the maids laughed together, one noticed Vivian's hair was messy and offered to fix it. Vivian panicked. She looked in the mirror and realized it must have happened when she fell asleep on Rahel's shoulder. Embarrassed, she agreed to let the maid tie it. The maid asked Rahel for permission. Rahel nodded and waited. While combing her hair, the maid praised its softness. Vivian proudly said her father combed it every night. The maid smiled and said most men find that boring. Her father must love her very much. Vivian agreed happily. Then the maid teased her, asking if she had a boyfriend or a boy she liked. Rahel suddenly looked away. Vivian remembered how Rahel had reacted to Peter earlier. Maybe she was jealous. To reassure her, Vivian quickly said she had no interest in boyfriends. Those things weren't fun. The maid laughed and said many boys probably liked her. Vivian complained that boys only teased and annoyed her. The maid joked that maybe one day she would marry a nice boy. Vivian firmly said she didn't want marriage. She would live with her father and the young lady forever. Then she turned to Rahel and asked directly if she would stay her friend, for a very long time too. Rahel lowered her head silently, clearly moved. Vivian was confused by her quiet reaction. Meanwhile, in the Duke's office, he paused his work. It was already May. The anniversary of his daughter Isella's death was approaching. His mind drifted back to the day she brought him flowers, saying they reminded her of her childhood when she used to give them to him. The Duke sighed. 5 years had passed, yet he still hadn't grown used to his daughter's absence. He knew he would carry that pain for the rest of his life. A voice outside interrupted his thoughts. When he looked out the window, he saw movement in the courtyard. Was that Vivian? He realized the mansion had become lively again since her arrival, just like when Isella was alive. A faint smile appeared on his face. He quickly scolded himself. No one could ever replace his daughter. Later, the mansion grew quiet again. He assumed Vivian had gone home. Then there was a knock. Her voice asked for permission to enter. He was surprised, but allowed it. Vivian stepped in politely and thanked him for his time. He asked why she was there. Wasn't she supposed to be in lessons with Rahel? She explained Rahel had gone to her heir lesson, and she only came to give him something. The Duke raised an eyebrow. She approached with a small box and said she had bought it during her village visit, but hadn't found the right moment to give it. Inside was an elegant wooden bookmark. The Duke was surprised. It wasn't his birthday, and he hadn't done anything special for her. Vivian said there was no special reason. While buying gifts for the maids, she saw it and thought of him. He teased her, asking if she bought it so he wouldn't feel left out. She immediately denied it and said she carefully chose something he would like. He examined it. It was made of Goko wood. Its scent repelled insects, ideal for preserving books. He praised her taste and said he would use it well. Vivian beamed. Then she asked if she could come read with him sometimes. The Duke looked puzzled. How had they reached this point? She said her etiquette teacher taught her that you can understand a person by the books they read. He realized she wanted to know him better. He asked why. She said honestly that she wanted to become close to him. He smiled slyly and called the gift a bribe. If she were honest, he might grant her wish. Vivian said all she wanted was to be his friend. The Duke was stunned. Why? She couldn't tell him she wanted to improve his relationship with Rahel, so she said she believed he was kind. Her philosophy teacher once said having a good friend is like living another life, so she wanted to be his friend. The Duke wondered if the lessons had made her overly thoughtful. Vivian added playfully that she already had many friends his age. He laughed and asked if she had truly befriended people his age before. After a pause, he agreed. She could come any time. Vivian was overjoyed. From that day on, whenever Rahel attended heir lessons, Vivian visited the Duke, despite initially worrying she might annoy him. The Duke always welcomed her with snacks. Vivian took that as proof he liked her. One day, she told him she had read a philosophy book titled Life is a Series of Regrets and wanted to discuss it. He was impressed a 9-year-old was reading something so deep. He asked if she had ever regretted anything. She said the book reminded her of something from the past. She told him about a time she found an orphan baby bird in the forest. She had cared for it lovingly until it grew strong. Then she released it back into the wild. Soon after, she found it dead near their house, likely bitten by a snake while trying to return. The Duke asked if she regretted letting it go. She admitted she did. She often wondered if it would still be alive if she had kept it. The Duke comforted her. Good intentions do not always bring good results. She had made the best choice she could at the time, and the bird had chosen to fly. Vivian hesitated and asked softly if it would have stayed if she hadn't sent it away. He offered another view. Even if she kept it safely in a cage, it might have longed for the sky and resented her. He told her to stop endless what-ifs. What truly happened was that the bird lived happily with her and later tasted freedom. She must let go of the past. The bird would not want her trapped in regret. Vivian thanked him. Then she asked if he had ever regretted anything. Since he had listened to her, she wanted to listen to him too. After a pause, he felt strangely willing to speak. Was there any life without regret? He said he once had a daughter. Vivian clarified. Rahel's mother? He nodded. She lost her own mother early, so he tried to protect her even more. She was precious to him. He wanted to give her the most valuable things in the world. But she only wanted small, ordinary things. He forced her to accept what he believed was best. He thought that was love. He remembered her begging him to save Leifrid, the man she loved. He refused. There was no proof to clear Leifred's name. Helping him would brand them traitors. He coldly reminded her she had been promised the position of crown princess in exchange for letting Leifrid die quietly. She must forget him. He remembered the look of despair in her eyes. And he never knew she was carrying his grandson at the time. The Duke continued. The daughter who had always obeyed him finally left his side to protect the child in her womb. At that moment, he realized he had not been living for his daughter, but for his own pride. Years later, she returned with Rahel, already terminally ill. He regretted everything. If he had respected her wishes, if he had not pushed her away, maybe she would never have suffered that disease. Even now, he still regretted that day. Vivian listened quietly. She understood. Of course, Rahel's mother must have resented being forced. Vivian tried to comfort him. Parents are like that. Her own father forced her to take medicine and stopped her from climbing trees. She hated it at the time, but she knew he did it out of love. So Rahel's mother must have loved him too. And if she loved him, she would not want him trapped in regret forever. The Duke remembered Isela on her deathbed. She admitted she had once held resentment toward him. But after becoming a mother, she understood his feelings. She asked him to forgive the man he had been in the past. After recalling that memory, the Duke whispered that it was time to let her rest. Elsewhere in the mansion, Sally was furious. She smashed objects in her room, angry that her mother had failed to expel Vivian. Vivian was spending more time in the palace. Even the servants no longer rushed when she called. Then she saw Vivian speaking with Butler Owen, saying she had read with the Duke. Sally was stunned. How had that girl gotten so close to him? She decided she could not rely on her mother anymore. She would remove Vivian herself. Later, as Vivian prepared to leave, she told Rahel they would meet the day after tomorrow. Rahel asked why not tomorrow. Vivian gently reminded her that tomorrow was the anniversary of her mother's death. Wouldn't she be in mourning? Rahel lowered her head and said she didn't do such things. Vivian was confused. Was she at odds with her mother? She quickly apologized, saying she didn't want to hurt her. Rahel explained quietly that she believed her grandfather would not like seeing her mourn. Vivian grabbed her shoulders firmly. That was not true. It is natural for a daughter to miss her mother and honor her memory. Rahel's mind drifted back. She remembered overhearing the Duke say that if not for her existence, her mother might not have suffered like that. She remembered seeing him collapse beside Isela, whispering that she ended up that way to save her child. From that day, a terrifying belief took root in Rahel's heart. Her mother's illness was because of her. At the funeral, she was convinced she was the reason her mother died. She thought her grandfather must hate her, and she hated him too. But deep down, she didn't want to see him cry, so she decided it was better not to attend memorial ceremonies at all. Vivian broke the silence with one simple question. Do you miss your mother? After hesitation, Rahel admitted she missed her very much. Vivian immediately grabbed her hand and suggested they go see her. Rahel was confused. How? Vivian clarified she meant her mother's portrait in the palace. Rahel said it should be in the fourth-floor gallery. Vivian smiled and suggested they sneak there today, since the Duke would be busy tomorrow with the memorial. Rahel agreed without hesitation. Vivian reminded her they should bring flowers. Rahel said her mother loved a flower called marca, but it only bloomed in the north. Vivian suggested they make paper ones. Rahel said drawings of the flower should be in the library. They split up, Rahel to find the drawings, Vivian to check if the gallery was empty. From afar, Sally watched them with a dark smile and whispered that this would be Vivian's end. Later, the girls finished making the paper flowers. Vivian proudly declared the mission complete, though in truth, Rahel had folded most of them. They headed to the gallery and confirmed it was empty. As they approached the portrait, Vivian suddenly stopped. The nanny and Sally were already there. The nanny asked to speak with Vivian. Before she could respond, Sally loudly accused her of stealing the young lady's belongings. Rahel immediately defended Vivian, saying she had been with her the entire time. Sally insisted she saw Vivian leave the room, take another path, and sneak back alone. Vivian firmly denied it. Sally cunningly asked if anyone else had seen her elsewhere at that time, knowing servants rarely use the fourth floor. Vivian stood her ground. She said she didn't have to prove her innocence. Sally had to prove her guilt. "Do you have evidence?" she asked sharply. Sally pointed to Vivian's bag. "Then open it." Vivian felt confused. She had only put the paper flowers in her bag. She hadn't checked what else might be inside. If the flowers were seen, their plan to sneak into the gallery would be exposed. Before she could react, Sally snatched the bag from her hands. She turned it upside down. Paper flowers scattered across the floor. And something else fell. Rahel's hairpin. Vivian froze. How did it get into her bag? She realized instantly. It was a trap. Sally picked up the pin and shouted that Vivian had stolen it. She claimed the flowers were just a cover. Servants began whispering. The nanny stepped forward and scolded Vivian loudly, asking how she dared steal from the young lady after gaining her trust. The whispers grew. Vivian felt trapped. She had suggested the gallery. She had asked Rahel to search the library. Everything pointed to her. Fear tightened her chest. Would Rahel believe her? Before things escalated further, a calm but powerful voice interrupted. The Duke had arrived. He asked why this child was being disciplined. The nanny said Vivian had entered the young lady's room alone and stolen something. The Duke asked for evidence. Sally presented the hairpin and said it was found in Vivian's bag. The Duke looked at Vivian. "Did you steal it?" Vivian felt helpless. She had no proof. All she could think to say was that it was unfair. Before she could speak, Rahel stepped forward quietly. "I gave it to her." Everyone froze. Vivian stared at her in shock. Rahel continued coldly, asking the nanny if she needed permission to give her own belonging to her friend. The nanny argued that covering up a friend's mistake was not true friendship. Rahel cut her off. A true friend believes their friend when they are treated unfairly. She repeated Vivian's own words. Sally pointed angrily at the paper flowers and demanded an explanation. Rahel answered softly. They had made them together to present to her mother. Vivian felt overwhelming gratitude. Rahel had revealed their secret just to defend her. The Duke looked surprised. He asked why they chose today instead of tomorrow, the Memorial Day. Rahel hesitated, then said she thought her grandfather would not want to see her at the memorial. The Duke was stunned. Butler Owen stepped in calmly, saying the false accusation against Vivian had been cleared, and everyone should return to their duties. He told Sally to apologize. Sally glanced at her mother, received no support, and ran off. Vivian thought bitterly that if they truly meant to apologize, they would not have set the trap. Rahel took Vivian's hand and said it was late. She should go home. Vivian knelt instead and began picking up the scattered paper flowers. Rahel asked what she was doing. Vivian said they couldn't leave them like that. They had promised to give them to her mother. Rahel told her it was enough. Vivian refused. Rahel's sincerity shouldn't be ruined like this. Then the Duke spoke. He asked Rahel if they would go together to the back garden tomorrow. Vivian should come too. The next day, the three of them stood before Isella's grave. Vivian placed a bouquet of paper marca flowers carefully at the grave. The Duke realized Rahel must have told her about those flowers. She had wanted to come. He felt ashamed he hadn't seen it sooner. Rahel avoided his gaze. She remembered his past words, blaming her presence for her mother's illness. She remembered him crying. Guilt twisted inside her. Then the Duke spoke gently. Her mother would be happy to see her. If he had known she wanted to visit, he would have brought her sooner. He once thought she was afraid of him. But the truth was, he was the coward. Every time he saw her, he felt suffocated by guilt. He believed he had killed her mother by sending her away. He had lived in regret ever since. But if he let this moment pass, he would regret that too. He apologized. He admitted he had been a foolish grandfather. Rahel stood frozen. She didn't know what she felt, anger or relief. Overwhelmed, she ran away. Vivian gently told the Duke that maybe Rahel didn't hate him. Sometimes after a quarrel, people need time before they reconcile. Rahel had been hurt for years. It would take longer. She asked if he would wait. He said he would wait, no matter how long. Vivian smiled and said she would wait with them. Then she went to find Rahel. The Duke stood before the grave and quietly promised his daughter they would be all right. Later, in the library, Vivian found Rahel sitting on the floor, crying. She asked gently if she had run away earlier because she was shy, or because she hated the Duke. She said if she knew what Rahel was feeling, she could help. Rahel remembered Vivian's words. Friends share their true feelings. She admitted she didn't understand her own heart. She didn't know if she was happy or sad. She didn't know what she wanted from her grandfather. Would Vivian understand this unstable side of her? Vivian smiled. Of course she would. She promised to stay beside her until she figured it out. She would cry with her, laugh with her, and be angry with her. She was on her side. Rahel whispered her name softly. Shyly, she admitted to herself that she liked Vivian very much. 2 months later, many things had changed. Rahel took Vivian to the secret magic training ground in the basement. There, she revealed her hidden abilities. She confessed her special body that absorbs mana. Vivian already knew from the novel, but hearing it from Rahel meant trust. Still, she noticed a subtle change in Rahel's behavior. One day, Rahel seriously asked if she truly hated boys. Vivian answered firmly that she did, and that she would only play with her. She thought Rahel feared she would marry and leave someday. So she promised she would never play with boys or hold their hands. Rahel looked confused, but said nothing more. Vivian assumed she was reassured. The biggest change was the Duke. He began inviting both of them for tea. Rahel no longer avoided him. Their relationship slowly improved. She looked more stable, more like a real child who finally had someone to rely on. That relieved Vivian deeply. Then, one day, Vivian heard a strange buzzing sound. It seemed to come from the West Forest. That forest was forbidden because monsters appeared there. Yet it felt like something was calling her. Rahel noticed her distraction and asked if something was wrong. Vivian quickly denied it. It must be her imagination. Inside the palace, she couldn't possibly hear the forest. Just then, the Duke summoned them. Rain had begun, heavy and ominous. He said it was better for Vivian to wait until it stopped before returning home. While they sat together, Vivian noticed Rahel was holding her hand. The Duke was staring at them. Embarrassed, Vivian quickly let go, wondering if it was improper. But the Duke continued looking at them even after. He commented that it rained often in the south. Vivian asked if it was rare in the north, even in summer. He said the north was different, and villagers didn't welcome summer much. Vivian said she loved rainy days because she slept well to the sound of rain. Then she added nervously that it just shouldn't rain during the festival. The Duke raised an eyebrow. Festival? Vivian explained that in 2 weeks, the annual summer festival would be held. Vivian excitedly explained that during the festival, people wore demon and ghost costumes, and the streets were filled with delicious food, which of course was her favorite part. The Duke showed interest in the ghost costumes. Vivian immediately seized the moment and politely asked if she and Rahel could wander around together that day. The Duke looked at Rahel and asked if she wanted to go. Vivian quickly assured him that she did. The Duke narrowed his eyes and asked whether Rahel would go reluctantly, just because Vivian was pressuring her. Vivian froze. How did he see through her that easily? Before she could answer, Rahel stepped in and firmly said she was the one who wanted to go. The Duke smiled and agreed. Vivian cheered and declared he was the best ever. Then the Duke shifted the topic. He asked about her father's bakery and suggested hiring him as an assistant to the palace chef. Vivian blinked in shock. Did he really mean her father? The Duke confirmed, if her father agreed. Vivian understood immediately what this meant. A palace servant's salary would far exceed the bakery's income. They would no longer need to travel back and forth. It was a huge opportunity. But after thinking carefully, she thanked him and refused. The Duke was surprised and asked why. Hesitantly, she admitted her father had no real talent for baking or cooking. She had a conscience. The Duke wondered if she was being modest. A loving daughter usually praised her father proudly. He smiled and said he had expected rejection, just not for that reason. In fact, now he wanted to taste the bread. Vivian silently thought he wouldn't say that if he actually saw it. He then asked what her father was good at. That night, she found out. Her father proudly presented her with a tray of strangely shaped blue bread. She stared at it in horror. He explained it was a new creation, made from medicinal herbs with added food coloring because ordinary bread was boring. He urged her to try it. Vivian internally screamed. Blue bread killed appetite. Still, she took a bite. When he asked for her opinion, she said honestly that if it weren't healthy, it would make her angry. She realized the bakery could not survive like this. Her father was surviving purely on his handsome face. Feeling guilty for being harsh, she suggested he accept the Duke's offer and work at the Edelin house. Her father stiffened at the Duke's name. She asked what he thought. He rejected it immediately. Flatly, he would not go to Edelin Palace. Vivian was stunned. She tried to persuade him. More money, a grand palace, stability. But he shook his head. He did not want to be owned by another person. To him, that kind of work was boring and horrific. Her father said he preferred living quietly with just the two of them and pulled her into a tight hug. Vivian smiled and told him she loved living with him too. She had only asked because he looked like he had been working too hard lately. He laughed softly and said his daughter had really grown up, worrying about him now. Then he suddenly remembered she had not eaten dinner yet. He proudly announced he had prepared soup, using leftover medicinal herbs from the blue bread. Vivian felt her soul leave her body. He carried her to the table and insisted she try it. She silently accepted her fate. While eating, he asked what she had learned at the palace. She said it was a history lesson, trying to ignore the taste she was slowly getting used to. He asked if she remembered anything specific. She thought for a moment and suddenly said, Dean Luzoid. Her father began coughing violently. Vivian panicked and rushed to get him water. When he calmed down, she asked carefully if he knew that name. He said, of course. Dean Luzoid was famous? Vivian nodded. That made sense. She explained what she had learned. There existed a race different from humans, demons, skilled in magic. Because of repeated raids and looting, conflict between humans and demons had been constant. 10 years ago, the current emperor launched a campaign to subdue the demon world. Leading that operation was the youngest swordmaster in Imperial history, commander of the Imperial Second Knights, Dean Luzoid. He won successive battles even in harsh terrain, but eventually, he was ambushed, surrounded. He ordered his subordinates to retreat and stayed behind alone. It was said he fell in battle. His body was never found. He was declared missing. After that, demon invasions quieted. The Empire called him a hero. Vivian admitted that as a 9-year-old, it was natural to admire such a hero. He was strong enough to defeat villains alone, brave enough to sacrifice himself for his men. Her father quietly interrupted. Maybe he was not wonderful in reality. Vivian blinked. He said history is written by the victors. It always favors them. What if the demons were kind? What if Dean Luzoid was the evil one? What if humans lied because he was one of them? He said, just as there are bad humans, there are good demons. He did not want her to hate good demons, simply because history was told from a human perspective. Vivian stared at him and asked if he had ever met a good demon. He said, yes, before the demon world was sealed. Vivian remembered the passage had closed 6 years ago after the Demon King lost the war. So he had met one before that? Her father admitted that he once believed the same history she did. He once thought Dean Luzoid was evil, but he had regretted that belief. He hoped his daughter would not make the same mistake. Vivian wondered if her father was speaking about that good demon he once met. Still, she promised she would judge people for herself, whether they were good or bad. Her father smiled and teasingly asked whose smart daughter she was. She proudly answered that she was her mother's daughter, and they both laughed. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, her father called her name. She was standing by the window, staring outside. He sensed something was wrong. She denied it quickly, but he knew her. She hid things whenever she thought they would worry him. He walked over and carried her gently in his arms, asking again what was troubling her. After hesitating, she admitted she felt as if the forest was calling her. He asked if she meant the West Forest. She clarified it was not a voice, just a strange feeling, as if the forest itself was calling. He looked serious and asked if she only felt that way because he had forbidden her from going there. She denied it strongly and reminded him that he had warned her about monsters. At that, he sternly forbade her from ever entering that forest. After tucking her in, he wished her sweet dreams. But once she slept, worry clouded his face. He wondered if something had happened in the forest. The Emperor's men were secretly searching for places where the boundary between the human world and the demon world was weak, not to protect people, but to reopen the passage and obtain the Demon King's heart. Unlike humans, every demon could wield mana, and legend said the Demon King's heart was a massive condensed core of mana. The Emperor, consumed by an inferiority complex toward Leafred, coveted that power. Vivian's father had believed the Emperor gave up after the Demon Gate was sealed, but now he wasn't so sure. He glanced at the calendar. The summer festival was approaching. Vivian must be excited. He remembered the last time he went to the forest, in March, just days before Duke Edelin arrived. Maybe it was time to check it again himself. Meanwhile, Nanny Margaret stood trembling before her door. She had received a threatening letter. Whoever hides the daughter of a traitor will face death. Margaret realized someone knew Rahel was actually a boy. The letter warned her to come to an inn, or the Duke would learn that her daughter had revealed the young lady's secret. Her thoughts immediately went to Sally. Earlier, Sally had angrily demanded to know when she would expel Vivian. Margaret had said she was waiting for the right moment, but Sally had shouted that Vivian might marry Rahel. Margaret had exploded in fury and warned her daughter never to speak of that recklessly. If anyone heard, it would mean death. Sally had apologized, claiming she spoke in anger. Now Margaret suspected she had leaked the secret. A maid had handed her the letter from a strange man. Margaret knew she had no choice. She went to the inn. Inside a dark room, a mysterious man waited. He calmly asked her about her life in the countryside over the past months. Margaret immediately recognized the man. He was the Emperor's inspector who had visited months ago. Terror crushed her. The Emperor knew. She fell to her knees, begging for mercy, swearing she never meant to deceive His Majesty. She said she only wanted to raise her daughter properly after losing her husband. The inspector cut her off coldly. He was not there for emotional pleas. His Majesty wanted this handled quietly. She would deal with it. The scenario was simple. The young lady who went to the countryside to recover with her grandfather would die in a tragic accident. Then he smiled slyly and asked her one last question. What should a traitor who hides a traitor's son do to survive? Meanwhile, in the village, Vivian stood before the closed bakery door. She told herself she was a mature 9-year-old who understood parenting was hard. Maybe her father needed a break, but she was furious at the timing, just days before the festival, when their new bread was finally selling. Her father explained it was different this time. Uncle Max's relative had died. He had to attend. Vivian mentally calculated that this meant a distant stranger's funeral. He promised he would return by the last day of the festival. He told her not to grumble, to wash her hands and brush her teeth. She teased him back, not to drink too much, not to wander around, and not to approach scary men. He laughed and asked who the parent was. He promised to behave and return safely. He asked her to get along well with the young lady. He apologized to Butler Owen for the trouble and entrusted Vivian to him. Originally, Vivian planned to stay at Peter's general store. Rahel immediately asked if Peter would be there. Vivian said yes, it was his house. Rahel rejected it instantly. She had been told boys and girls shouldn't sleep together after 8. Vivian explained they would sleep in separate rooms. Rahel still refused. Vivian realized jealousy. She reassured her she was still her favorite. Rahel denied being jealous and suggested Vivian stay at the palace instead. There were many guest rooms. Vivian suddenly realized that was perfect. Safe, close, no carriage rides, and her friend was there. She happily agreed. That evening, Vivian burst with excitement. They could stay up all night, play, have pillow fights. While playing chess, she yawned heavily. Suddenly, Rahel stood up and said she was going to her room. Vivian blinked in confusion. Wasn't she sleeping here? Rahel calmly said that it was Vivian's room. Vivian stared at her in disbelief. She reminded her that when friends stay over, they usually sleep together. Rahel replied stiffly that sleeping together before marriage conflicted with etiquette. Vivian immediately argued that rule applied to boys and girls. They were both girls. There was no problem. Rahel refused again. Without another word, she fled the room. Vivian stood there completely puzzled. She grumbled to herself, wondering if they truly wouldn't sleep together for the next few days. This might be their first and last chance. Once her father returned, he would never allow her to stay out overnight again. Rahel waved slightly from the doorway, wished her good night, and closed the door. Vivian was stunned. Why invite her to stay at the palace if this was how it would be? She flopped dramatically onto the bed, muttering that Rahel was a fool. But the mattress was unbelievably soft. Within seconds, her anger melted. If she closed her eyes now, she would fall asleep immediately. Just then, she heard it again. That mysterious voice calling her.